On this episode of Still Loading, swag strats for days. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I am your host, Josh Koval, and today on the show, we are capping off Mario Month with a freaking great episode, if I do say so myself. We are going to be talking about Super Mario Bros. 3. We're going to be talking about speedrunning Super Mario Bros. 3. And with me today is one of the top runners in the game, the Haxor, or just just call you Haxor for short?
Yeah, that's fine. Either one.
That's fine.
Haxor, Hacks, the Haxor.
We'll do Hacks.
All of them. All right.
We'll do Hacks.
Sounds good.
So first off, thank you so much for joining me, man. I've been looking forward to this all week, especially at the time of this recording. We're going to keep current events out of this. Let's just say current events have been a little hectic lately. So this is a nice welcome distraction. But before we dive into this in earnest, let's have the audience get to know you a little bit better. How did you first get into speedrunning?
Yeah, it's a great question. Great opener. The simple answer to that is kind of by chance, just looking through YouTube. I was just looking at my recommended, and then there was this video about Mario 1 there made by Summoning Soul. And so I was like, oh, let me check this out.
That seems to be a trend. That's the exact thing GTA said too.
Yeah. I think, a lot of people kind of found it that way. So watched the video, thought it was really interesting. So I started watching all of his videos. And they were all really interesting. And one of them was about Mario 3. And this was my favorite, Nintendo game as a kid, NES game. So I was really interested about it. And it was the Any% video. So it was the first one he made on it. And one of the runners featured in that was actually Mitch Flowerpower, who, most people know as the best runner of the game.
The top runner,
Yeah. And he's been there for, like a decade or more, really, which has been impressive. But anyway, I found his Twitch channel through there because I was like, oh, this guy actually live streams. And, I was into Twitch, watching Twitch since my account's actually Justin TV account. I don't know if you heard of or remember that, but anyway.
No.
So I've been on Twitch. Okay, that was the service before Twitch that became Twitch, was Justin
Wow.
TV.
Okay. Yeah. See, I didn't get into Twitch until after it was already popular. Like I knew bits about it, but I was really late to the streaming game. I was one of those people who was like, why would I watch someone play a game? And then I just kind of discovered, like, actually, this is kind of fun.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's like way back in the day when I started watching Twitch regularly. It was like probably 2013, 2014. Shroud wasn't Shroud. He was Emmy Clips. But anyway, started watching Mitch because I thought it was really interesting at the time. He was going for the Warpless world record. So Karua had the record at the time. It was a 50-57. And Mitch was able to beat it. And it was, I think, at the end of March of 2018.
Now, was that, which category would that have been for?
It was Warpless.
It was Warpless. So any percent Warpless or?
Yep, any percent Warpless.
Okay.
So he beat that at the end of March, and I actually started speedrunning the game in April. So it was right around the same time. And it really was just, I watched him. It looked interesting. I was like, hey, I think I could probably do this. And not that well, obviously, at the time, but
it takes a bit of, just a smidge of practice to get good at speedrunning a game.
Yeah, a few 100,000 hours, whatever.
I was talking. So this is really putting this recording session in a specific point of time because I recorded this after Ace, but before last week's episode, and he said something. He said he had like over like, I think 20,000 attempts or something like that. I can only imagine you're probably up there or higher, or I can only imagine. With that said, so you already kind of answered my second question, like why Mario 3, but let's go into about a little bit more detail. What are some of your memories of Mario 3? You said it was your favorite Nintendo game growing up, so it makes
Yeah.
sense why you picked it. But like, let's before we dive into the speed run in earnest, the actual details about the strats and everything and routing and all that good stuff. What are some of your Mario 3 memories?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm gonna date myself a little bit here, by saying that the NES was the first gaming system I ever played.
It's all
So
right. I'm slightly. I think I'm slightly younger than Super Nintendo should have been my first. Let me just put it that way.
sure,
N64 was actually my first. I got it when I was 10, but
okay,
I was Super Nintendo would have been right at that spot for me.
yeah, and for me too, really by the time I remember playing it, Super Nintendo was just out. I think because it would have been the early '90s. So but no, my first system that I remember playing is actually the NES because my sister had one, and we didn't get to play it a whole lot because it was hers. So she had control over it. So on occasion we get to play it, but for the most part, not really. And the weird thing is Mario One was obviously the first game I played because it came with the system. But
Hmm.
we always loved renting Mario 3. That anytime we would rent a video game, you go to the store. I kind of miss this part. You look through the shelves and there's all these weird games, and
Hmm.
most of them in those days were all garbage. But um,
Yeah. You were
yeah,
never sure what. I remember I got Gex 64,
Oh
and
yeah,
it was just
yeah,
kind of I didn't know what was happening. I didn't
yep.
understand what I was doing. Now some of those
A lot
games
of
are stupid. Not Gex, but there was the first who's the developer? Sucker Punch game is
mhm.
on the N64, and it was like Rocket Robot on wheels. And now that game is bizarrely expensive. It's
Yeah.
like a platformer, but you're a roller coaster cart. I don't fucking know. It was very strange.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, you can still find some gems like that just weren't mass produced because they weren't super
Yeah.
popular.
But yeah, so you
Um,
would rent it from, well, doesn't not necessarily Blockbuster, because before Blockbuster
yeah,
owned everything, there
before,
was a lot of mom and pop rental shops.
yeah, I think it was called Premiere Video is where we rented it from. But anyway, so yeah, Mario 3, that was the game we'd rent, and I love playing it. I liked all the different power ups, the P speed concept. I mean, I wasn't very coordinated at the time, so I couldn't necessarily beat the game because I was like, 4 or 5 years old. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. The warp whistles, I don't remember how we figured out those existed or how we knew, but we always knew somehow.
I mean, that was the definition of like playground rumors at the time,
Yeah.
like also it also helped that it was in The Wizard. The Wizard had
Yeah.
the famous scene that showed like that was before that movie came out, before the game came out. So before it even came out, people knew there was something special you could do
Yep.
to get the warp whistle. So I'm not surprised. And but yeah, like there's playground rumors, and it's weird because unfortunately the internet kind of killed those playground rumors. You no
Yeah.
longer have like the, oh, if you go over here, or if the other go-to one from Pokemon is like, if you can use strength on the car, you'll get Mew or what, something like that. So
Yeah.
you kind of lose it. But yeah, so okay, so you got the warp whistles and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wasn't, good enough again to really beat the game. Yeah, sometimes you try to play through without the warp whistles, you'd get part of the way through the game and it was impossible. I feel like maybe World 6 was definitely that point where, I mean, some of those levels are brutal, if
They're
you can
so
imagine
hard.
as a kid. Yeah.
I actually beat this game for the first time like 2-3 years ago, but I'm not going to say
Okay.
I beat it in earnest. I didn't use save states or rewind features or anything like that, but I did use all the warp whistles. I used 3 warp whistles and I got to the end and I beat the
Okay.
final
Okay.
levels. So it's like I
Yeah.
beat it, but I really beat it? I didn't really play it all the way through. Kind of like how, if do you, does it count as beating the original Super Mario Bros. If you use all the warp zones? It technically does, but at the same time, you
Yeah.
didn't go through it level by level, which I still have never beaten the original Super Mario Bros. I
Oh,
really
that
bad.
game, it's just brutal. It
The
just,
last level, dude,
yeah.
like the last level leading
Oh,
up to
yeah.
Bowser's Castle. No, thank
Yeah.
you. Um,
Yeah. Definitely.
Any
I
other
know exactly what you're talking about. Hammer Bros, man, they're a pain.
Yes, that's exactly it, and that's why when I watch speedrunners, I'm like, "I don't understand. This is all witchcraft to me. I don't get it. You all concern me." Are th are there any other memories, though, that you have before we dive into the speedrun?
Of Mario 3? No, not really. Just playing with my sister. My cousins had the game as well, so we would play it when we go visit them. Actually, they had the trackpad too. I don't know if you remember the what the heck is it? The Olympic game, or it's World Class
Yes,
Track Meet. That's what it is,
world
right?
class I actually
Yeah.
after we're done recording, I have one. I
Okay.
can show it to
Nice.
you. It's wrapped up
Yeah.
in a cord, but I have one somewhere over there.
Yeah. Trying to play the games with that was kind of fun too. Playing. Yeah. I don't know.
That sounds pretty I mean, that's something that people do now. I had a friend who played the original Halo on Legendary using a DDR pad. So all you could really do is melee. That's pretty much it. There's no art, there's no triggers. So you're pretty much screwed with that. But all right, so let's dive into the speed run now in earnest. And I guess off the top, I should at least say I do this. It's been a while since I did my episode on Super Mario 3, which admittedly I actually would like to redo, like talk about all the levels. But we're not here to kind of review the game and talk about its design. We're here to talk about its
Yeah.
speed running. So the game came out initially in Japan on oh my gosh, I just totally lost the date. There we October 23rd, 1988, and it didn't come
Yep.
over to the US until almost a year and a half later on February 12th, 1990. Which is it's so insane to think that it was that far apart, considering I believe the original came out literally months apart from each other. It came
Hmm.
out in 85, like summer of 85 in Japan, and then fall of
Yeah.
85 in North America. But it's not surprising considering, uh, well, we were supposed to get Super Mario Bros. 2, then that was too hard, and so they're like, "All right, let's do the Doki Doki thing,"
Yep.
um, and here we go. But anyway, so Super Mario Bros. 3. I think my first question that I wanted to ask you about the speed run is what types of routing goes into it? Mario 1 didn't really have a lot of it because it's a
Hmm.
fairly linear line. You either do all the
Linear.
levels
Yep.
or you do the warp zones. There's not really a whole lot in between. So for Mario 3, what types of routing goes into it?
Yeah, obviously it really depends on the category you play. I my focus is mainly on the longer categories. So let's talk about Warpless first. So
Actually, that might even be a good thing. Let's talk about the cat. Let's list some of the
yeah,
most
okay,
popular
sure.
categories as the
Yeah.
jumping off point, and then we'll go into the routing for them. So, what are some of the most
Yeah.
popular categories?
So there's four main categories of the game. The first is any percent. So as a standard any percent, beat the game as fast as possible. But with Mario 3, there's actually a wrong warp that you execute in level 7-1 to go right to Peach's room at the end of the game. So you don't even fight Bowser. It's a way different category than everything else, and you're doing what's called ace. It's arbitrary code execution is what it stands for, but essentially just think of it as a wrong warp in
That
order to do
thing, I
that.
we should talk about that in a little bit because that is
Hmm.
one of the most mind-boggling things to the
Yeah,
casual player that could ever be described. I know it's very difficult to explain without the visual medium, so we'll try to keep it
right,
simple.
right.
But anyway, so that's any percent. What's the next one?
Yep. So there's any percent no wrong warp. So that is like what you would consider to be the classic any percent of the game. Before the wrong warp was discovered, you get the two warp whistles. You go from World 1 to World 8. You beat Bowser. You beat the game. So that's the route that we all did as kids, pretty much.
Mhm.
And then from there, there's Warpless, which is you're beating the game as fast as possible. You're just not using the warp whistles. So you're going to have to play through every world, and you're, trying to skip all the slowest levels and that sort of thing. And so that's where that routing portion of it gets really important, is in the Warpless category, for instance. And then 100% is interesting because when we say 100% with Mario 3, we really mean like 100% level completion versus like you're getting all the mushroom houses and the cards and all that stuff, because
Yeah.
you can actually get all of those in one playthrough.
But
And
that's
that's
gotta be
really,
that's very difficult to do because especially the card houses, those are
yeah,
all because you're talking about like the tarot cards, the matching game, right? That's what you mean by
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
There,
yeah.
that's. Is there any way that you are able to manipulate the RNG for those, or is it just all luck constantly?
It's strange that I know the answer to this question, and I really have no other reason to know this other than it was a point in one of the Warpless points tournaments, and
We'll
so
go for the listeners. We will talk about the points tournaments in just a moment. But sorry, go on.
I don't know why, but depending on when you enter the card, you can press the button at the same time and get two different results.
Hmm.
So there's no way to guarantee actually matching what you want to match on the card. So
Okay. So
and for it's RNG. It's
it's
the card
100%
itself.
RNG. You can't manipulate
Yeah,
it.
you can give yourself better odds.
That's about it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you can. So each there's 3 matches you have to do. Each one of those, if you're like, oh, I'll just use the same reference. Oh, but you're going to get 2 different results with that exact same reference, depending on when you enter the card.
Unless
So
you have some of them solved already, or
no, period. Like it was. It seemed
okay.
like it was a 1 in 8, but it's
So
not
let me
really. It's
see if
like a
I
1
get
in
this
4.
then. So let's say
Yeah.
you have a card in the top right corner and it's a mushroom. And
Oh, you're talking about the end spade card. I'm sorry. I'm talking about the one
oh,
where
the
you match the
rotating
image.
thing.
That
Yes,
one,
yes.
yes, that
Okay.
one. So the end spade card that spawns after you hit a multiple of 80,000 points on the map. So that there's only 8
That's how it spawns?
possibilities. Yes.
I'm dead. So we had this kind of epiphany with Aces episode 2. There's
Yeah.
a lot of stuff that might be common in the speedrunning community that I know fucking shit on. I don't know
Yeah.
at all. So so it's a multiple of 8,000 is what
80,000 points. Yep.
80,000 points, a multiple of
Yep.
80,000. And if
Yep.
so, you have to nail 80,000 or a multiple of that on the dot, and then it spawns
No, once you go over it,
once you
period.
go over.
However
Okay.
far you go, it doesn't matter. The only caveat to that is if there's already one spawned on the map, you won't spawn a second one.
That
But
makes sense. Okay.
yeah,
But so for the thing that I got mixed up on, the little rotating thing, almost like the
yes,
slot machine, not a slot machine, but you get what I'm saying.
yeah, that's RNG.
That's
Um,
RNG. Okay.
so
But
the matching game, the card matching game, there's only 8 possibilities. So there are 8 different ones you can get.
so what I was going to ask then, is there a way to know what the matches for that card
Yep,
game is beforehand? There
yep,
is. Okay.
there
How do
is. Yeah. So, since there's only 8 possibilities, right, you can flip the first 2 cards and pretty much know exactly what you're working with.
Oh, okay. So you just all
Yeah.
the runners just if they want to, they just have the whole thing memorized. If they it's not necessary for the run, so it's not really needed to memorize
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So it's weird because there are things worth knowing on there. It's super niche. There would be reasons to play the card, but we can get
Okay.
into that later. But yeah, the only reason I know the 80,000 thing is from the co-op run. Those are really important because you don't want either runner to have to play one because it's a big time loss. So, you
Oh,
know,
okay.
the, yeah, the big discovery before our last GDQ run is I figured out a routing via the it's always sunny meme with Charlie and he's scribbling on the
And
board
he's
and he
got
looks
like
crazy and
the
stuff.
crazy eyes thing. Yeah.
That that was me with this route. Okay. And I was in the shower and I'm in the shower thinking about it. I'm like, oh my God, we can actually skip this
Just
card. So I'm
imagine you
going
have like a
through.
whiteboard in there and you're just like, it's not
Yeah.
staying on the board, but I'll figure it out.
And the hilarious thing, the runs the next day, I get out of the shower. I'm like, Mitch, we can skip them all. Here's how we do it. We're changing everything at 24 hours before we have to run.
That's
And
really funny.
yeah,
That's
um,
when was the last time you did a co-op run at GDQ? When was that run that you're talking about?
so that was SGDQ 2021. So that would have been over the summer.
2021, so just
Yep.
a little more than a year ago.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Just under a year. Yep.
Oh, sorry. Yes, just under a year. My bad. So yeah. So the 100%. Back to what we were saying about the different categories. Was
Yeah,
that the 100%? You don't have to do all that. You don't have to do the end cards.
correct.
You don't have to do the rotating picture thing.
Yep.
Or get all the toad houses or anything. That it's just playing every level through to completion.
Yep. And
Okay.
that includes the Hammer Bros. So you got to beat all the Hammer Bros. You have to beat all the castles, obviously.
Hmm.
And then you have to beat the Piranha Plant levels in World 7 as well. And then the hands in World
Yes.
8.
Do you have to beat all the hand? Do you have to like keep going back and forth until you get all the hands?
So people don't realize this. You can actually just click A and then you enter the hand, even if it
Oh, so
doesn't
you
pull
can
you in.
you just go through and just okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because why would
It's
you want
funny.
to? Why would you willingly go
Yeah.
into one of those? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. People go crazy all the time during 100% because they think your run's dead because you play all the hands. You're like, no, no, no. I had to play them. It's fine.
That's pretty good. So with the routing, what are some? Obviously, 100%. It seems like you don't have to do too much other than trying to avoid any of those the end card ones or well, I guess what's the routing for 100% look like? What are some common things that is there a specific optimal order? Because
There-
some of the levels you can totally
yeah.
skip technically. Like, so what's some of the optimal orders that or the what is the optimal order for some of them? I'm not asking you to go through the whole thing level by level. That's a lot.
Right.
That's a lot of fucking levels to
So
recite. I'm sure you could, but
yeah, so there's a few considerations with 100%. Obviously, you want the least amount of overworld map movements possible. That's the most ideal, right? So the less times I have to move on the map, obviously going to be the least amount of time. However, the Hammer Bros move every time you complete a level, and they
mhm.
don't if they're no longer on the map. So usually the priority is to beat them as quickly as possible
Okay.
and get them off the map. So you don't always get to take that optimal routing in terms of, least amount of map movements. Also, there are certain places like in World 2, for instance, when you hammer the rock, there's the whistle. You're familiar with that, the whistle behind the rock there. That hammer, bro, there's 4 different spaces it can be on. Obviously, you want it to be as close as possible to the rock, but you
You
don't
never
have
know what
control
you're
over
gonna
that.
get.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there any way to manipulate that RNG or nah, it's just luck of the draw?
Absolutely not. So it's weird. That stuff's determined from power on, and it's an RNG loop. So it's constantly changing. There are small frame windows at the end of each level that determine how the Hammer Bros are going to move, and then it's over. So
Have task bots been able to manipulate them at all?
oh yes, yeah. The
Yeah.
task manipulates all the movements. To it doesn't necessarily get the least amount of Hammer Bro movements because it's weird. Sometimes you have to like delay to get better RNG at something later,
Hmm.
but it gets the least amount to go as fast as possible. I guess is how I would answer that.
That's interesting. Okay. So
Yeah.
what about like any percent warpless?
hmm
What's the routing look
So
like for that?
you're skipping as many auto scrollers as possible. Um,
That I don't think I don't think I've had to talk about it in any of the other Mario speedrunning episodes so
no,
far. Because I don't think Mario 2 has any auto scrollers. I don't believe
no.
3 is the first one that really introduced it, and that is like the bane of speedrunners.
Yeah, obviously you're stuck there. You can't play any more optimally than just, scrolling to the right of the stage as it goes. I mean, that's really all you can do for there. So and obviously those are really long levels too. Mario 3 you move really quickly, so most levels are over in a flash, but the auto scrollers, I mean, you're stuck on them for a really long time. So in Warpless you're trying to skip all of those. The ones you can't skip are the castles, obviously. But
Yeah.
you're gonna skip all the other ones using clouds in some cases, using hammers in some cases, and also using those items to play the least amount of total levels possible too. The other consideration is you actually want to fight the least amount of hammer bros possible as well. So you only
Mm-hmm.
want the items from them that are going to save you time. and that's pretty much just hammers and clouds. So you're fighting those ones, and the other ones you're skipping all of them, basically.
Okay. With these different, I'm not going to ask you for the routes of every single category because I know there's four main ones, but actually, you know what? Let's at least talk about the route for the any percent with
Hmm.
the wrong warp, because I think this would be a good
Hmm.
time to talk about the wrong warp. So
Yeah.
any percent, I'm assuming, because the record for any percent right now is surprisingly not held by Mitch, believe it or not. Well, I'm sure you know
Oh
that,
yeah. No,
but
yeah. Zakubi
Sakubi,
is
yeah,
incredible at that category. I mean, just has taken it, you know,
almost a full
beyond.
second ahead of the second place player. Not quite a
y-
full second, but it's pretty damn
Yeah,
close.
yeah. It's already at a level that's beyond imagination a few years ago, and then he's trying to get a 301, and that's the end of the category as we know it currently. Is kind of like once you hit 301, I don't really see how you go any further, and there's more complex explanations why that is, but the gist of it is, it's just the limitation of how fast you can play the levels in World One, and then the fastest way you can set it up in
Hmm.
7-1 as well.
So with the any percent, the record, by the way, for the listeners, I didn't even read it out. It's 3 minutes, 2 seconds, and 383 milliseconds.
Hmm.
Uh, that's 3 minutes.
Yep.
That hurts my brain. You can beat that game in 3 minutes of that wrong warp. So, what do the runners do? What, like, because you said the wrong warps in World 7?
Yes. So it's the same route almost as the any percent no wrong warp. The only
Hmm.
difference is, so you get the two whistles like normal. You're actually going to warp to World 2 instead of going to the warp zone using another whistle to go to 8. So you go to World 2 and then you warp again and then go to 7.
Okay.
Uh, so you can enter stage 7-1. And the weird thing about 7-1, it's these weird, like, vertical stages with pipes. You can use enemies in those stages to set up, like, memory values in the game.
Hmm.
And it's like when you clip into and enter a pipe a certain way, so you get like the red pipe glitches when you enter a pipe on the side, more or less. Once you do that, for some reason, like if those values are correct, it warps you to a particular spot.
I think that the most fascinating thing about these wrong warps is that you're essentially programming the game in the game.
Yes.
And that is the
Yes.
hardest thing for me to wrap my head around. Like,
Yeah.
I just don't understand how, like, I get it on a, like, on an overhead level. Like, you're just doing all these different inputs and grabbing different
Yeah.
items and replace, like, kind of reminds me, I'm not saying this is what's happening, but kind of reminds me of what they do in like Ocarina of Time runs, where they can like suddenly, like, they can replace a bottle value with something else, and all of a sudden the value does a
Yes.
shitload of damage. And it almost seems like replacing values like in the code, and
Yes.
because of that it just wrong warps you to the end of the level. It's the same thing in Super Mario World, where it just poofs you to the end of the level.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, that's what's happening there, and you can, as you mentioned, there are other things you can modify too. You could technically, do ones that are complex enough to potentially modify physics of the game, right? So
Hmm.
like you could, in theory, in Mario 3, modify the maximum value for P speed and make it even faster.
That would be actually really fun for like exhibition like events or something like
Yeah.
that. Peace
Now,
be times three, and all you just
yeah, I don't know how you would do it, and no one's done it, but it should be something that you can theoretically do, because like really you're going beyond the rules of the game, because you're basically creating your own rules,
I think
and
it's cool
that's
too. The guy who Kubi, sorry, what's his name?
Zakubi.
Zakubi. Okay, so the C is just completely silent. It's
Yeah.
CZ Zakubi. Okay, Zakubi.
Yep.
I like that. It boggles my mind that he did it on actual NES hardware, and then the second place is using an emulator. I mean, emulator now is like basically the same. Like, I've from what I understand, like a lot emulator runs are pretty close to base hardware now, right? Like the emulators are that good.
It's the same. There are some benefits of using a console instead. So most top runners you're going to see actually use a console because it's a little more responsive in your movements. So, I can adjust to like the input delay on an emulator. The problem is though, if I make a mistake, I don't get to visually see I've made that mistake as fast. So sometimes like I, I don't get to correct the mistake in time, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get enough time on the console, sometimes you do get to correct the mistake. With that being said, like a lot of times if I do too big of a jump or too small of a jump, I immediately know just from the press. But
Yeah.
there are other times where you're getting visual feedback as well. So categories like that, you'll see a lot of emulator runners generally just because it's short and more approachable, and any mistake the run's over anyway. But I mean, Zakubi is just one of the best Mario 3 players. Period. He's got top times in every category of the game.
That's not number 2 in any percent wrong warp,
Yep.
no wrong warp. Number 2 in any percent warpless. Number
Yep.
3 in 100%. That's nuts.
Mm-hmm.
So my next question to kind of get off of routes, because routes, I mean, once again, the 2D Mario's, we talked about this with GT Ace on the first episode or the second episode of the month. With 2D Mario's, routing is based in most 2D games. Routing is pretty straightforward. You might have some interesting things here every now and then, like what you were saying before with the co-op run that you do with Mitch. That's super interesting that you
Yeah.
completely like completely retooled it on the fly right before your GDQ run last year. But the next thing I wanted to ask was glitches, and the final thing we're going to talk about is swag strats. And I don't know, maybe I'll mention swag strats in the previous episode. That's not recorded yet, so once
Mm-hmm.
again, a little peek behind the scenes for the listeners. But we'll talk about those last. But are there any like useful glitches that you use throughout the run? Because I know there are some categories that you have, like any percent allows you to use glitches. Obviously, the
Yeah.
biggest glitch is the wrong warp, but there's other glitches, I'm assuming. So, what are some of the useful glitches that you can use throughout the run?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I do have to mention though, the routing thing is actually really important in Mario 3. It's the only 2D one where that is important because of the Hammer Bros. That's the biggest reason why, is the
Okay,
Hammer
okay.
Bros. Yeah, they kind of like will dictate you at certain points because you don't want to fight ones that have worthless items. So you're kind of like playing this game where you're trying to hide from them almost. But yeah,
And you're trying to, I
anyway,
guess you're trying to figure out, like, based off what you see their current location is,
yeah,
what you kind of run through all the different routes that you could use in your head based
yeah.
off where their current location is, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so like once you've played enough, you know what sort of stuff's possible to happen. And you can actually identify which bro has which item as well, based on the direction they turn after you complete a level, which is
Really?
really, yeah. So next time, here's a good example. If you get to the end of World 2 sometime, notice that the two Hammer Bros, and both are alive, of course, and you can see them. Notice that they will face two different directions. And so you can tell which one has the music box and which one has the hammer as a result. And you can use the same concept because it's the same in subsequent worlds. So they have like number values assigned to them. So it's like Hammer Bro 1, 2, and then there's Hammer Bro 3, which is really just a duplicate of Hammer Bro 1 in terms of how it behaves. But in those cases, when you have the three Hammer Bros on the map, you can always see the first one. So you always know which one's the first item. And it's, you can figure out which one's the third item because it behaves exactly like the one with the first
Is
item.
that item always going to be, is that item randomized every time? So like if you saw two Hammer
No.
Bros, okay, so you'll know automatically just
Yeah.
by looking at. So like in the
Yeah.
where's the first time, which world do you first come across Hammer Bros in? 2,
So
3?
World 1 technically, but you always see it. It's the star. It's always got a star. So in World
Yeah.
1. World 2 is the first time this becomes important. So the first two bros there, the hammer after you beat a level will face left before it starts to move. And then the one with the music box will face right before it starts to move. And that's how you can tell which is which. So ideally, you want to get the one with the hammer because that,
You can
allows you
use
to
that to
skip
break
levels.
rocks and yeah.
Yeah. And, you don't want the music box ideally. I mean, if you get it, there are other things you can do with it, but ideally.
This is a dumb question that I know other
Yeah.
people, even non speedrunners, know. What the fuck's the point of the music box?
Skipping Hammer Bros. And
Is that
you skip
literally it?
Hammer. Yeah, skipping Hammer Bros. You can put the Piranha Plant stages to sleep in World 7 as well.
Okay, I felt really dumb not knowing that, but I couldn't like I've never I don't I always when I play Super Mario 3, I always forget to use the items, and so
Yeah.
I never use the music box. I'm like, I don't know what the purpose of this thing is. Okay,
Yep.
that makes a lot
That's
more sense now. I understand.
yeah, yeah. And a nice piece of trivia is the music that plays is SMB1 music when you
Oh,
from the yeah, it's
that's kind
interesting.
of cool. That's a nice little
Yeah.
nod. So what are some of the to get back to the glitches?
Yeah.
What are some of the glitches that are helpful to a runner throughout any of the runs?
It's a great question. So there's a few of them that I can think of. So staying on the theme of Hammer Bros, I'll just start with the Hammer Bro one. So anybody who's played Mario 3 knows, you move through the overworld map and then there'll be map transitions where the screen will shift once you hit a certain spot on the screen and you'll
Hmm.
get to see a new section of the map. If the Hammer Bro is standing on the square where that shift occurs, you can actually move right over it and not enter the fight without using a
Oh,
music box. So when a screen transition occurs, you get 1 frame to skip the Hammer Bro. However, also when a screen transition occurs, you can buffer your overworld movement so you hold the direction you're planning to move during that transition, and you'll always move on the first frame.
oh, so you can just hold it ahead of time. Is that what the
Yep.
term buffer means? Like you prep an
Yes.
action before the screen? Okay, I've
Yeah.
heard it used a bunch of times, and I was trying to think of I kind of understood it, but I wanted to make sure I
Yeah.
understood it entirely.
There's
Okay.
a couple different buffer concepts. One's like you hold a button and then you let go and then does like a certain thing, or like you press it and it'll do a certain thing. Or in the case of like Punch Out, if you punch during the punch animation, you'll punch on the first possible frame on the next one, right? So if you're clicking quick like that, and that's a way for them to like get certain setups as quick as possible, that sort of thing too. So
Okay.
those are the types of buffers that when I think of buffer, that's what it means. So
That's good to know. I did not know that. So, and
yeah,
that's what you're saying. So, if you know if the Hammer Bro is like right next to you and they're going to move towards you, if you buffer that input to move in their direction, you'll literally just cross paths and then
right
never.
over them. Yep.
That's pretty cool. Okay, that's pretty awesome. What are
Um,
some other glitches though?
yeah. So there are clips. Those are probably the most famous ones in Mario 3. So we never play the inside of 7-1, for instance. We always clip through the doorway. Um, so there's a lot of doorway and wall clips that you can use to skip long sections of levels. So basically how those work is Mario has subpixel values assigned to him. So there's his physical location on the screen, which is where he's at, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then within that, there are between 0 and 15 for values of his actual location. So this is the actual exposition of Mario. So it's less than a pixel. That's why they call it subpixels, right?
Okay.
So certain subpixels, when you hit a wall, a certain way will allow you to clip through the wall. So that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the theory of how that works. Also, you can clip through the floor in much the same way. Now this is a little more complicated because there's so many things that factor into floor clipping. There's, your X subpixel, but also you have a Y subpixel. Now that comes into play with floor clipping when it didn't with wall clipping. I mean, yeah, it doesn't really with wall clipping. Um, Also, how you do your jump to the floor also matters. Your speed value matters for both. So there are minimum speed values you need in order to be able to do these clips as well. In the
Mm-hmm.
case of wall clipping, it's 32. In the case of floor clipping, I honestly don't remember because
Like
they don't happen very often.
your speed value has to be 32. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, yeah. So that's like the minimum speed value you can have. So to put it in perspective, Mario without P speed, his maximum value is 40.
Okay.
So you have to be pretty close to that in order to be able to, at minimum, clip a wall. But the larger your speed value is, the more of those subpixels that will potentially work. So,
So you always
but
want to hit it at, ideally you'd hit it at P speed.
yeah, that's going to give you the best odds. But with that
But
being
when you're moving
said,
that fast, it's harder to be accurate with the landing.
yeah, but with that being said, there are ways to know what subpixel you have prior to going into a level. And if you hit the wall at the same time every time, like you do in 7.1, for instance, you can always get the clip if you know I have a good subpixel going in the level, because you'll always have the same one once you hit the wall. The weird thing is, P speed actually creates uncertainty depending on when you get it. So if you get P speed earlier or later, it's going to change your subpixel value.
Huh.
Yeah.
That I so d- depending on what time you get, like when you say your subpixel value, you're talking about Mario's
Yeah.
specific subpixel value. So
Exactly.
Mario's
Yep.
actual location on the world in the level map, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term.
Yeah. Within the pixel, he's got his pixel location, which you can physically see. And then this is that value. Less
The
than that,
actual
it's
legit
almost like,
X and Y
yeah.
coordinate. Okay, that makes a
Yeah.
lot. That actually helps explain a lot for me, because I always would hear the term subpixel. I'm like,
Yep.
how can something be smaller than a pixel? What are you talking
Yeah.
about? It's not because
Th-
it's not a pixel made up of other pixels. It's literally just the
Yeah.
X and Y value that Mario is physically on. It's just that you visually can't necessarily display that because
Right.
it's a point on the map, not an actual square.
Yes.
So I get you. I get you.
Yes. Yeah, think of it as like, an analogous scientific thing would be using a microscope, right?
Hmm.
That would be, you see an item here, but if you look deeper in the item, you see a lot more of what's going on, right? So that's kind of how I think of it in my head, I guess.
No, it makes
Um,
sense.
but yeah, the weird thing is, for 7.1, there are certain subpixels that work. So I can, at the end of the World 6 airship, set up my subpixel to be, 14 or 15, which are the highest subpixels. So what this all means is, if you go from 15 to 0, because it
Hmm.
wraps over, right? That means you move 1 pixel right on the screen.
Okay.
And when you go from 0 to 15, that means you go 1 pixel left
Okay.
on the screen. So the smallest tap possible that'll get you to move those once you're at 0 will move you 1 subpixel. And so that's how we're able to manipulate that sort of thing for certain clips, like wall clips, for instance. And that's been like a
Oh, I
huge
see. So
development.
that's why the runners have to run back and they try to position themselves in a specific spot before they build up their speed again to try a wall clip.
That part is the build up the speed. The subpixel manipulation thing only works for the first try. After that, you're just kind of like hoping
Just
for the
hoping that you
best.
find it at that
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
When
pretty
so when
much.
does that subpixel manipulation actually occur? Is it at the very beginning of the level? Is it the beginning of the game? Like, when does that actually occur?
That's a great question. So, the subpixels carry over from stage to stage. So you actually have to do it at the end of the previous stage.
Okay, so you have to manipulate it then, and so
Yep.
do all runners know how to like what they want to do beforehand, or is it still just like I hope I got, or is it just kind of blindly figuring out which subpixel they're aiming for?
No, we all the top level runners for the 7.1 clip, the wall clip, know exactly what they want. Now, it's not super easy to get what you want all the
No,
time.
you're
It's hard
looking at
to
what you just even described. It's a
uh,
15th of a pixel. Like
yeah,
it's
it's hard to
super.
move that small, right? Like, it
Yeah,
really is. So it takes a bit of practice. So we actually have practice tools that'll tell us, what our subpixel is, and so
that's
you can get,
wild.
yeah, yeah, you can get used to it that way. So you get some feedback there. And so yeah, this has been like a huge development in the game over the last couple of years, and I'll take a little bit of credit for it, because a runner named Louis is the guy that started doing it, and the way he was doing it was a lot simpler than what we do now. And I was big into this. I'm like, holy crap. I used to never get the clip in 7-1 first try. Like I would
Mm-hmm.
never get it first try. And it was the worst. I started doing what Louis was doing. I'm like, guys, I'm getting this all the time. This is great. Way more often. I'm like, this works. This is the truth. And everybody's super skeptical. And I'm trying to get Mitch to do it and pushing him to do it,
Is he still not
to
doing it?
look into it. And he wasn't doing it, but then he started to look into it. And then once he started to look into it, the wheels started to click and turn. And now he's taking it to a level way beyond,
Yeah.
yeah, the research Mitch has done specifically with subpixel manipulation has kind of brought the run to the next level.
I mentioned this on the GTA episode. I know I keep referring back to it, but we're going to be covering a lot of the same, not the same points because obviously the games are different, but like a lot of similar questions get asked and a lot of similar points come up. And the thing that I made in that episode, and I think it really applies again here in this specific instance here, is speedrunners really have an eye into the developers, into the game development that nobody else will. Like I could be one of the most what would be someone who reads a lot of books is well read, is someone who plays a lot of games
Right.
well played. We'll just say I could be the most well played quote unquote gamer,
Yeah.
and I could, break down all the design and why this is beautiful design and why this visually, blah, blah, blah. But you won't get that unless you break it, unless you do speed running. Like, it's interesting to me how
Mm-hmm.
much speedrunners can break a game down and kind of get into the programming of the game without actually looking at the source code. It's really interesting how you guys figure all this stuff out. So
A lot of it's
the
dumb luck.
oh, some of
Yeah.
it, yeah. Actually,
Yeah.
it was funny. I was watching it wasn't a Mario run. It was, oh fuck, what game was it? It was a game on, it was a GDQ hotfix from like a night or two ago, and I am blanking on the game they were playing, but it was a Family Guy game, and the runner was like, "That has never happened before." And now I know the moment that comes out of a runner's mouth, they're going to spend the next like month and a half trying to replicate that exact same instance, trying to see can we do this
Yep.
again, which will in
Yep.
turn save
Yep.
us time.
Yeah.
It becomes this obsessive thing in a good way. In a good way.
Yeah.
And then speaking of wall clips, there's an easy one that literally anybody can do. It's in what, World 8, right?
Oh yes, the
The
one up
one
clip.
the
Yes.
so there's a block that you can jump under. I think it's an invisible block at first. I
Yep.
believe.
Yep.
So you hit the block and then you run and you crouch. So and then when you try to stand up, Mario just clips through the wall and you can skip a section. It's the easiest clip. Like, you don't
Yeah.
need to know any speedrunning tech. You don't need to know any skill. You don't need to have any skill. You can just literally just run and jump up into it and he'll automatically clip through it.
Yeah, yeah. The one up clip, once that you make that block appear, as long as you can slide up far enough into it, you just clip right through the wall right at the top of Bowser's stairs. So it's a pretty decent time save. We say it's the easiest clip, and it is, like, in terms of like execution, it's by far the easiest. I don't know why. I feel like that clip doesn't always work, but first try
Sometimes it
anyway,
doesn't. It's
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it does freak out. I mean, it works most of the time, but yeah,
Yeah.
I've had it like where it freaks out. But okay,
Yeah. I
what
don't know what the
is
deal is with it.
what's another glitch that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so my personal favorite is the wall jump. So the way the wall jump works is if you hit the wall, I think it's a 6 pixel window on the wall. So there's like 3 pixels above uh, the point where a block starts and like 3 pixels below, roughly. I think this is how
Okay.
this works. And if you hit the wall in that area and you have a particular subpixel value, Mario will actually go far enough in the wall that the game thinks he's standing on a platform.
Okay.
But it's only generally, it's between 1 and 3 frames, but it's generally 1 frame. If you're big Mario, it's going to be always 1 frame unless you have P speed. For small Mario, it could be up to 2 frames without P speed. But
That's still once again, listeners, a frame occurs every 60.
yes,
Occurs 60 times every second. So it's a
yes,
60th of a second that you have
yep.
to be able to notice that you clip into the wall just that smidge in order to jump. Am I correct? In order to jump off
That
this?
That is correct. And then you just hit A and then you jump and that's it.
You make it sound so easy.
Oh, it's so easy. I mean, from a standpoint of complexity, it's not super complicated, right? You're just going to the wall, hitting the right spot, hitting A. But man, you're right. That timing, that's the important part. The interesting thing though is, the level where you do that is a 6-9 in the run.
Hmm.
So you don't have to do that. You can actually P-wing and fly over that level. So, most people do it that way. Or they play 6-10 because you don't need a wall jump there and you can get fire in there. So it's like a bit of a route divergence.
Hmm.
But I love the wall jump because it's swag, right? Like it's cool. You're jumping in midair off of nothing. It's awesome, and it's fast too. It's the fastest way to play that level without a P-wing as well. So yeah, it's just one of those things where when you hit it, it feels really good. When you miss it, it doesn't feel as good. But
Yeah.
the timing of when you hit the wall is going to be consistent, right? So it's almost like if you're a musician, right, and your note's coming up and you're ready for it. It's
Hmm.
almost like that. So it is difficult, but once you get that timing down, it's the same every time, and you start to get into a rhythm. And most people will end up hitting stuff like that way more often than you think should be possible because of that.
Okay.
So
And this kind of leads me into then talking about different swag strats and then also specifically the point runs. So
yeah.
I've always been a fan of speedrunning ever since like discovering GDQ a couple of years ago. But I
Hmm.
remember we were talking about Mitch Flower Power for a little bit, the top runner
Yeah.
in the game, and he has this tournament once a year that where he gets all a bunch of the top runners or some of the best runners, and instead of just doing a flat out race, there's a point scoring system that determines it. So you get a
Yep.
point, whoever wins the race gets a point or a certain number of points. But then there's also you get points for completing or losing points for failing to complete certain strategies, and a lot of them are super difficult and some of them aren't necessary in the run, but they're once again swag, things that you can do just to
Hmm.
show off. I guess I should have described that for the listeners. Swag strats are strats you can do, like tech and different
Pointless.
strats you can do. Yeah, pointless. Some of them are useful, but most of
Yeah.
them are not. Most
Yeah.
swag
Yep.
strats are not. It's like they're the ones that are useful. Like this saves like 2 frames, but if you miss it, you waste 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Sucks to be you. You missed it. Stuff like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
So what are some? So there's a lot in Mitch's tournament. There's a lot of different swag strats, but what are some of your favorite swag strats throughout the Mario 3 run?
Yeah. So, his point tournament, it's basically like a scavenger hunt almost. It's like an
Hmm.
SMB3 scavenger hunt, more or less. And each of the different items on the scavenger hunt have different point values associated with them. So some of my favorites, the wall jump was a point, at least once, for sure. Obviously is going to be one of my favorites. There's a lot of clips too. People always like to see the clips. For me, it's just like, I mean, you're bouncing your head off a wall and hoping, or off a ceiling into a
Hmm.
wall, hoping for the best. It's kind of whatever. Um, in terms of that regard, the thing I actually really like about the tournament more than the swag strats, though, is just like it introduces some really interesting routing in order to hit as many things on the scavenger hunt as you possibly can throughout the
Hmm.
game, right? So that sort of stuff I think is really neat. So it creates a little bit of swag there in terms of sometimes you'll skip things that you would normally use and have to come up with like new routes on the fly in order to like stay on track as a result. It's really hard to explain because he has points like you have to skip this bro or these bros or get them to move a particular way, and then you can't fight them. But then because you don't have that item, you then have to play levels you normally don't play and that sort of thing, and you kind of have to route that stuff on the fly. So
Yeah.
that's that part of it. I think is really the swag part of it. Also, he has points like you enter a mushroom house and have to get a particular item.
Mm-hmm.
Totally RNG. There's certain items you can get from each mushroom house. And one of the points was like, I think you had to get a fire flower from a mushroom house once was a point. So you're sitting there entering mushroom houses. So you're trying to find the ones, just hoping for the best. But you don't want to enter too many, right? Because you're starting to lose time now.
Yeah.
It is also
Praying
a
to RNG
race.
Jesus that one of these will get
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. And then, you can find places that use that sort of thing. And that's kind of cool. But in terms of strats, I think are really cool. So, in 2-2, there's a way to like, this is a sand level where you slide down the hills and you try to keep that slide speed throughout the entire level.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a point during one of the tournaments was getting
I think I
getting
remember
to
that.
you get to the end to the pipe and you have to have a certain number on the timer when you get to the pipe.
Okay.
So it's really hard to get a 292 entering the pipe in that level. It requires you to save a lot of speed throughout the level. So that I really enjoyed because you're trying to, you're kind of pushing the
That's
limits
beneficial to actual categories as well, not just fun tournaments
Yeah.
and whatnot. That's cool.
But normally you don't push it that hard necessarily because you add some additional risk there. I mean, you could miss one of your jumps because you're trying to hit them as soon as you land. Because as soon as every frame you're in contact with the ground, you lose speed. So you're trying to maintain the speed value, which is above, Mario's maximum speed threshold without P speed. And you're doing that by pressing A as soon as you hit the ground throughout the level. But, there are risks because you'll miss a jump. There's a pit that if you slide too well, you might just go right into the pit. You might hit an enemy, in which case you lose more points because that season you lost points by taking damage at a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that I thought was really, really neat. So that, again, that's just swag getting in there at 292, but it was actually, point value. Some other ones are like, there's a level in World 4, the first fortress, that
Mm-hmm.
is notorious in the game or being just exceptionally hard. It's really the hardest level in the game, I would say, to consistently speedrun, close to optimal. If you don't recall what I'm talking about, it's the level where there's a lot of horizontal moving thwomps.
Okay.
You're going,
Yeah, it's the ones I know what you're talking about. So sometimes you
yeah,
have to lure one out and then you can run around it,
yes,
or sometimes you have to run past one and hope it doesn't catch you. And yeah,
yes.
I know what you're talking about.
Lots of duck jumping to do that perfectly. And that was a point one of the seasons is you had to, kill the boom boom and finish the level on a certain time. And, that's something you always strive for in the 100% run, but, and you hardly ever play in Warpless because there are certain circumstances without going into too much detail where you would play it in Warpless, but generally you don't. But for that points tournament, you wanted to play it because it was a point. So go play the level, get to show off a little bit of swag doing that level perfectly. And
There's one trick that I know is super beneficial, but it's so
mhm.
difficult to pull off, and it's in the final world, it's in the final castle where you have those 7 doors that you can choose to go through.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's I think it what is it, like the first door, if you go in the first door and then you're able if you normally casually, if you go through I think it's the first door, right? Is it the first door on there? You go through it and then you just fall down into the water underneath and then you have to climb back up and start over again. But if you go through the door and
oh
then
yeah.
you have less than a frame, you have like it's like a frame perfect trick to then go back through the door, like hit up again to go
Oh
back in through
yeah,
the door.
yeah. You're
uh
talking about door 3. Yeah, that's a
it's door
great one
3.
too.
That's a
Yeah, that's right.
it saves a lot of time, or
It
a decent.
saves. It doesn't. It doesn't even save that much time. That's what's crazy. It only saves like 3 seconds. You wouldn't believe it, but it's like 3 or 4 seconds. Well, I mean,
That's a
seems
lot
like a
of
lot of
this.
time.
Wouldn't
It
that be a lot of time for this though, for something that's been run as much as this?
it is. It's just it's such a crazy it's such a crazy trick because we're talking about the first fortress in World 3, by the way. It's such a crazy trick
Oh, it's
because
in
you're
World
doing a
3. It's not in the final world.
Yeah. So it's the
Okay, my
third
bad.
door that you enter, and there's one frame that you press up on the transition that you can re-enter the door and go straight to the boom boom fight. But
Yes, that's it.
you're doing it off a black screen. So normally when you do frame perfect inputs, you get some sort of reference like Mario's position. Because you're coming off of a black screen, you don't. You're just kind of like, it's all about, it's just straight timing. So it makes it so much difficult when you're not getting the visual feedback on top of the timing. But there's a way, and Teeks is another runner of the game, and he's done Door 3 quite a bit. There's a way you can set like a metronome and get used to the rhythm. I think it's like 100 BPM. If you get used to that, yeah. If you press up and you press up at 100 BPM, you'll actually get it on the first frame. I think it's 100.
Okay, so like they'll have like a metronome for like do 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 do,
Yeah,
and then you just have to hit the button on that same rhythm.
yeah. Except you can't use a metronome in a speedrun, right? Because it's banned. Like that's a banned tool. So you have to practice getting it in your head and then do the run and then do the
Yeah.
same thing. So
Dear God.
it's tricky. Yeah. I don't think it's exactly 100, but I think it's around there. That and yeah,
That's still crazy though. So that
it
only
is.
saves. It's one of the coolest tricks to watch visually for, especially for someone like me who doesn't know all the ins and outs of speedrunning.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a lot of times with speedruns, you'll be watching a run and the commentator will be like, "Oh, you don't. I know it doesn't look it, but that trick was super hard to pull off."
Yeah.
This is one where it's like both insanely hard to pull off and visually you understand why it's hard to pull off. And listeners, in case we're not describing it well enough, we're talking about that you have one frame to go back in the door, it's when you go through the door the first time, Mario's literally hovering in midair. There's no
Yep.
platform underneath Mario, so you can't go back in the door because Mario will fall as soon as the screen fades in. So
Yep.
if you are fast enough, you are able to hit up so Mario goes back through the door before he falls down into the water, and you have to travel back up because you lose a lot of time, a decent chunk of time if you try it.
Yep.
What is it like? How many seconds? I For some reason
Oh
I'm
man.
thinking 5 or 6, but I don't know if it's that
It's
high.
way more than that, yeah, because you
Is
got
it
to
really?
swim back to the other door, and then or swim back to the pipe, so then you get another pipe transition, and then you backtracked on top of it, and then you got to run back to the position you were in. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's quite a bit. Your run's over if you go for it and you miss it. Yeah, it's
It's
just
one of those things you just have to practice all the time and then hope. Like if you're trying to go for world
yeah.
record, you just hope your run's not dying on that one trick.
Yeah, and even then, like you people going for world record don't go for it because they'd rather bank on other RNG to work out in their favor at the end of the day.
Yeah, no,
But
it
it
makes
is
sense.
nice. It is nice to bank that. With that being said, the Hammer Bros might give you really bad movements, and then where's your door 3 at now? Doesn't matter because we've added 10 seconds to your run by being assholes.
One thing I think we should talk about too is just some of the more common strategies because I know I've said before I'm not a runner, but watching some runs, there's some certain things that I've picked up. Like every time you go into a boom boom fight, you generally want the fire flower, so you just you
Yeah.
shoot 2 fireballs. What you'll see runners do, listeners, what you'll see them do is they'll shoot the fireballs twice and then follow the fireballs across the screen so they don't despawn. So when they run onto the screen with boom boom, even though Mario can't hit Boom Boom yet, Boom Boom has already been hit by 2 fireballs, and then it's just
hmm
you just pounce him on the head once, and then he's done for, and then you take him out. Are there any other strategies like that where it's a really basic common strategy that you'll see it almost every time?
So the crazy thing about what you just described is like you know what you're seeing, but like what you've interpreted actually isn't even it's not correct because
That's not
we're
correct.
hitting
Okay.
we're beating it by hitting with 5 fireballs. So the stomp doesn't matter. It gets you so close that you're able to refire quick, right? By jumping on
Okay.
them.
So
So the stomp
wow.
doesn't matter. So yeah, either 5 fireballs or 3 stomps will take out a boom boom. And
Okay,
they
so that's not too.
it's
Are those like fireballs stacked on top of each other? You're visually only seeing two, but it's
yeah.
actually more.
Yeah,
Wow.
because when you're
Okay.
jumping on him, you're pounding him with fireballs because you're really close to him, right? So you can refire really fast. Um,
Oh, I see.
it's weird. The boom booms are really strange. They have two. It's almost like they have two separate life bars: one for stomping only, and one for fireballs and hammers only. And it gets really strange when, man, I don't know how deep I want to get into this. So the boom boom, you don't actually kill it; it gets converted to an item, and that item is the orb, right?
Yeah.
Um, So that's why it doesn't behave like other enemies in the game. So there's this weird glitch that you can get with the boom boom, and it can happen with fire, but it happens with hammer suit a lot. Sometimes you'll hit it with the hammers and it won't die, and
Okay.
you keep hitting it with hammers and it won't die because normally you throw one hammer through it and it just dies instantly. But you can get what's called the overkill glitch. So that's when its health bar it like wraps over. And so I think a Boom Boom's health bar can go up to like 35, but like it's set at 5 normally.
Okay.
And so when it wraps over, you have to hit it 35 times to actually kill it. Or is it, I think it's 35 with
Wow. So
fire.
you have to
So
be
if it,
careful then. So you don't want to like.
yes, yes. And that only happens with fire if you hit it with a fifth and sixth fireball on the same frame, which is really hard to do. It has to like move into your fireballs and they have to be doing a certain thing and then it like jumps, that sort of thing. Then you can get something like that. But normally that doesn't happen either. But if it does, it's a disaster because you got to stomp it.
And that takes
It's
so
the
much
only
more
way.
time then to take it out.
Yeah, by
That's
stomping it.
wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
But what's cool is if you kill it in that state, it instantly explodes and turns into the upside down orb. So that's what's happening when you kill it with the star in World 6. That's why that works that way. Because you're overkilling the boom boom, but you're doing it so quickly, it just instantly converts to an orb because the star is,
that's
doing
so
so much
weird. So
damage.
it doesn't actually, you're not like despawning Boom Boom. It just is converting into another sprite, which is the
Yep.
orb.
Yep.
That's weird that it's programmed that way.
Yeah.
Like, I guess it just like, well, the NES had some bizarre limitations. I've talked about it on a Patreon exclusive episode where the NES, I'd have to look it up again, but it only had the ability to display a certain number of sprites on a single scan line. And for listeners, what we mean by a scan line is it's literally just like think of a row of pixels
Yep.
across your TV. That's one
Yep.
scan line.
Yep.
And literally, if you think of how small a pixel is, there's literally, well, actually, easy way to describe it. If it's 1080p, that's usually the height of the screen. That's 1080 lines of pixels.
Yep.
Um, so the NES was 240p, so it's 240
Yep.
lines of pixels in height. So it could only have a sprite could only be displayed 8 sprites total per scan line. So they couldn't put too much on screen. Or if they wanted to, maybe it wasn't 8, maybe it was less, but they could only put a certain number of sprites per scan line. So sometimes they could technically, I'm sure they could put more on screen, but they would have to split it up so some are at the top of the screen and some are at the bottom. And they're, I don't know, the NES has a very complicated technical history. So I wonder if it had to do something with that. That's why they converted. I don't know why they would, but it's a very bizarre
Yeah.
choice.
Mario 3 was obviously made at the end of the life cycle of the system, so that's probably why a lot of these things were done that way. It pretty much, utilized the maximum capacity of what was possible with the NES. It stretches it to its limit. It's actually shocking that the game's as stable as it is,
Well,
considering
so
those
the
things,
way they
because it's almost,
this actually maybe I'll get to teach you something about this because I actually have
yeah,
done a little bit of research on this. I did an episode on Patreon as well about this, but
yeah,
basically the NES, like Mario 3 couldn't, if you take out the stuff they added to the cartridges of Super Mario 3, Mario 3 couldn't run on an NES natively. It would be impossible. What they
hmm
did was they had
hmm
these memory mapper chips, and basically listeners, memory mapper chips are, just think of them upgrades, like it's more powerful processors. That's not what they are, but for lack of a better term, each cartridge had built in upgrade hardware for the NES. So the MMC1 chip was the original, I think the original Super Mario Brothers. The MMC2 was actually Super Mario Brothers 2, and MMC3 was Super Mario Brothers 3. And
Okay.
what the MMC2 chip could do, it allowed scrolling in multiple directions, but it couldn't do it at the same time. Um,
Okay.
MMC2 is super common. That's why you have games like Metroid, because it can do it at two different, it can scroll in multiple directions, but it can't do it at the same time, which is why when you see in Metroid, you have horizontal hallways and vertical hallways.
Sure.
With Mario 3, you had the ability to actually scroll in all directions, but the way they did that was, and the reason, if you notice, because it's even the same way with ROMs, on the right side of the screen, the colors get a little, the objects'
Yeah.
colors are a little strange. They get funky. They almost
Yeah.
mirror what you see on the left side of the screen. If you notice it,
Yep.
sometimes like a coin block will be blue because on the same pixel on the opposite side, it's the sky or something like that.
Yeah.
The reason
Yeah.
that is because the way NES games used to work, or I shouldn't say used to work, is that there's loading seams that are normally visible, that are normally outside. Like if you think of your the screen as like a physical space, where your TV screen is at, is the loading seams are outside of it. Obviously,
Hmm.
it's all in a digital realm, but you get the idea. The loading seams are
Yeah.
outside of it. With the MMC3 chip, the loading seams, since the way that the NES stores video data, the loading seams were literally right up to the edge of the screen. There's a little bit more
Okay.
technical detail to it. And if you're interested in this, Hacks, I can send you a video that goes into much better detail than I'm explaining it.
Okay. That
Um,
is interesting. Yeah. So that explains why that game, when you get P speed, you can go up and down at the same time,
mhm,
right? Kind of like a you
exactly. I will send you a link to this
interesting.
video after we're done recording, man. I think you'll find it
Okay.
really interesting because it goes into more detail than I am, and it's a lot without a visual aid. It's very difficult to explain. So I'm boiling it down so that way I'm just describing the loading seams. But yeah,
Yeah.
and that's also, and the reason why it doesn't show up on the right side, sorry, the left side of the screen, because only the discoloration only shows up on the right side. But the reason it doesn't show up on the left is because on the left side there's a bar that they put on the side of the screen that, if you notice,
Okay.
there's like a single bar that's like maybe like a quarter of an inch thick
Yeah.
that just like blocks off that side of the screen. That's because it's hiding the other loading seam.
I
They
see.
couldn't do it on both sides. They could only do it on the left side.
I
So
see.
the
Okay. Okay.
MMC3 chip had other options. It allowed for like it that's why if you look on Mario 3, like all of your data is at the bottom of the screen and it moves
Yeah.
independently of the screen of the actual level. MMC1 didn't have that, which is why Mario 1's menu appears on the same screen and moves with you
I
and
see.
moves with you, and that's why they have to leave that blank space up top, and Mario can literally run across the data because they couldn't separate it in memory or something like
Okay.
that. It's very intricate. I
Yeah.
can It's an interesting like bit of tech breakdown, but anyway, that was a side tangent. I'm sorry. That was
Yeah,
not
no, that's good. Yeah, you were mentioning the sprite limits thing, which is something good to bring up where we use that to our advantage in the game, despawning
okay.
certain enemies to actually go quicker. There's a level in particular that it's very obvious this is happening. It's in World 6. It's 6-5. So it's a level where you have to fly up to the end, and there are two nippers there jumping. So you have to bring a shell up with you, right? To take them
Yes,
out,
yes.
break the blocks.
I know
So you
exactly what you're talking
actually,
about.
yeah. So you can actually despawn the second nipper with a P-wing. You go in the level of the P-wing. If you run to the right and get up there quick enough, you despawn the second nipper and don't need the shell. You go right to the end.
It's because there's too many objects on the screen and it
Yes.
can't render. That's smart.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
smart. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the best examples of that. It's also why on a lot of airships you'll see there should be rocky wrenches that spawn certain places and they don't. Let me think. There's another weird despawn you get in 7.2 that's much the same. You're despawning a nipper that allows you to get a certain P speed strat easier. It's just yeah, there's a few spots in the game where that's used to our advantage, and that's just the most famous, I would say.
Now, before we wrap up, because I did kind of like derail us a little bit here. What are some other swag strats you'd like to talk about before we kind of do a wrap up?
Let's see here. Swag strats. I
Or if
mean,
there's just
I
any
feel like
regular strats too. If there's anything else that you find interesting about the speedrun that we haven't talked about.
I think something big, something that's gotten big over the past few years is P meter manipulation.
Okay.
And what I mean by that, so you know the P meter, right? It fills
Mm-hmm.
as you run. Well, there's a frame rule associated with the P meter that allows it to build. So once the first check occurs, subsequent arrow checks happen every 8 frames,
So it's
right?
checking if you're at that speed every 8 frames.
Yeah, if you're moving a direction at that speed every 8 frames, right? Like that's the simplest way that I can explain it. So in theory, there are platforms that are too small to get, or like combinations of platforms that are too small to get P speed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with turnbacks, wiggles, uh, creating extra space by like falling off of something and turning back, you can build extra arrows on the P meter. Normally, you would only see a task do this. You know, that's why the task looks so wiggly in certain spots in Mario 3, because that's what it's doing. It's doing the task wiggles to build P speed earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do this as in RTA as well, in certain levels. So there are a few levels where this actually comes in handy. 5-1 is one such level where you like go into this gap and you do a turn back and you hang in the air and you land on the coin blocks within a certain amount of time, and then it continues to instantly build the P meter, and then you're able to get P speed and speed at the end of the level. Normally that's a level you don't get P speed in till the very end, but you get it a lot
Mm-hmm.
earlier. But 4-5, a level you only see in 100%, that one looks really crazy. And, I encourage people, if they've never seen the speed run, to watch the 100% world record, because Mitch does get in that run. And you'll understand what I mean. Mitch, he runs on the platforms a particular way. He does a turn back to kind of like do a little wiggle off of the one large pipe. He lands on this coin block section at exactly the right time, and he does a small hop to the second one. And then
Okay.
as he's falling off the second ones to land on the bullet bill, he has P speed, and then he can P speed to the end of the level. It's very, very technical, but that's something that people never did in the past. And over the past couple of years, he's been able to come up with a few strats. And there's some runners like I've done those as well. He's done them. There are a few others that attempt them as well. But yeah, I think those are swag, because you're getting P speed. That's a level again, 4-5. That's not a level you ever got P speed in, but now you can.
And if I remember watching, if I'm correct, I think I've seen runners do this before. It's kind of like they'll be on a small platform, and it almost looks like they're making a U shape with Mario. Like they'll run a bit to the left and then kind of turn back, and then run a bit to the right and turn back, and it's almost like they're going back and forth until the
So,
P
so
meter builds up.
that's different.
That's different.
That's the old
Okay.
way. Yeah, that's the old way of like you go back and forth and building it. This is, you don't go the other direction. Like you do a quick turn back to pause just enough and delay enough frames that when you hit the ground, that you're going to start building P speed right away. And so it squeezes out just enough distance that you get an extra arrow. It's really hard to explain. If you'll know what I mean if you watch the tasks in like level 6-6, because it gets P speed by doing all these crazy wiggles back and forth that
Okay.
is totally impossible for people to do. And then it does a floor clip to skip the entire level. It's the stupidest, it's the dumbest thing. You look at that, you're like, oh yeah, that's totally possible. If people are ever going to do that, no shot. But that's the concept of it. It's these little wiggles of going back and forth, and you hear like
You
Mario
never know,
screeching
man.
and stuff.
People have done weird ass stuff with this.
Listen,
I
I will take my hat and boil it and eat it if anyone ever clips that level. Okay, that's how confident that I am that it's never happening.
I'm gonna
It's
tweet
never
this to
happening.
Mitch. I'm gonna tweet this to Mitch. he doesn't know who I am, but I'm going to tweet this to him and just be like, you got to make him eat his hat. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. That there's certain things,
Yeah.
especially if it's like is it one of those things where the task is hitting left and right at the same time, or
It's just since the task you can for every frame you can do the exact inputs. It's just doing the exact correct inputs for like an eternity
okay.
to get P speed. Yeah, if you see the level, you'll know what I mean. You're like, oh yeah, you're never building P speed here. No, this is impossible.
There's there's not enough runways in order for you to get that speed up there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I'll send you the task video after this so you can see what I'm talking about
Do it.
with
Yeah,
the
I would
whales.
love to
Yeah,
see it because it
yeah,
seems like it'd be really task videos. I talked about this once again. I keep referencing the Ace episode, but we talked about. I mean, you have to talk about tasks with speedrunning,
yeah.
because it really shows what you can aspire to, whether it's possible
Hmm.
or not, of course. But task is
Gives
some
you
of the
ideas.
funniest. Yeah, and it's some of the funniest runs for you to watch because there's like the some of the shit that tassers do is just insane. One of my favorite
Yeah,
things that I've seen is like they'll I don't even know if I forget what game it was. It was a 2D game though, and the character was doing a whole bunch of stuff, and all of a sudden it just flew off to the side of the screen and ended the level. And it might have been Mario. And I think even it was like
yeah,
Mitch was like, "What the fuck's going on?" He was so
yeah,
confused by what was happening. Just some of the weird glitches that and task is a skill in and of its own, and that is so
yes,
tedious to do. I described it on the episode with Ace as it's like stop motion animation for video games. I
yeah, yeah. Pretty much, yeah.
It's just it's nuts. But all right, we should start wrapping this up. We've been going for a little bit. Um, so I guess final word on Super Mario Bros. 3 speedrunning. What would you recommend to people who want to get involved in the Mario speedrun community and Mario Brothers 3 specifically? Any specific resources you would recommend?
Yeah, I would suggest joining the community Discord. We have a community Discord for not just Mario 3, it includes Mario 1, Mario 2 US, Mario 2J, and Mario 3 as well. And these are just the NES games. There are a lot of great tools on there created by a lot of really talented runners. And also, it's a great place to go to, to get help if you're having problems on certain things. People can help troubleshoot. You can ask questions. Community is pretty active, so that's a good place to start. And checking out some of the different resources on there. We have a pretty good library of them, for the particular games. And then there are also some on SRC. So some of them are speedrun.com. When I say
Yeah.
SRC, that's what I mean. So there's some on there as well. There are some folks like Mitch has a lot of educational videos about different things. You can check out his channel. Louis got educational videos. You can check out his channel. He's known for Super Mario World and
Hmm.
is, maybe the greatest runner in the history of that game, but he also is a great Mario 3 runner. And he's got tools for Mario 3 as well on his channel. Teeks88 is another one. He's got tools on his Twitch channel. And yeah, I mean, those are kind of the places I would suggest starting. And in terms of, resources that you need, if you have the game, have an NES, you can get started that way. Just get a way to capture it. If you're playing on emulator, all you need, you can play on keyboard if you so choose. There aren't a ton of keyboard players for Mario 3, surprisingly, but
Really?
there are. Yeah, no, there aren't. When I started, I found it difficult to kind of
I
change direction.
I feel like keyboard. I because you I just feel like specifically emulators on
Yeah,
computer, like unless you have the controller, it's a lot harder. Like the inputs just feel sluggish,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, yeah. So with keyboard, for some reason they're good, and then when you put the controller in, the controller's like, oh,
Really?
there's
Okay.
there's input delay. Yeah, it's almost like if you hook up an NES to an old flat screen. That's kind of what it feels like.
Mhm.
Surprisingly, like I have a brand new one out in the living room. That baby like plays it lag free. It's insane. They've gotten a lot better with a lot of the screens, but I personally play on a flat screen too, but you have to look for certain ones that are low latency.
Or you have to get an
And
upscaler that you don't have, that removes the latency
yeah,
for you, which
yeah,
I would love to get this guy on. You ever heard of the Retro Tank 5X?
yes.
Yeah, I want one of those so bad. I
I
want
got
one
an
so bad.
OSSC, so
You got an OSSC? Okay, nice, nice.
yeah.
I need to do an episode on fidelity in gaming, like high fidelity retro gaming, and talking about. I'm kind of friends with the My Life in Gaming, with one of the My Life in Gaming guys, so I should probably get them on to talk about it. That'd be really
Hmm.
interesting. But yeah, okay, so let's wrap this episode up. Haxor, thank you so much again for joining me. Where can everybody find you online? And is there anything you would like to promote?
Yeah, sure. My Twitch channel is twitch.tv/the Haxor. That is me. Very simple. I also have a YouTube channel, which is the Hax Speedrun as well. So youtube.com/the Hax Speedrun. I post my videos there of PBs and things of that nature. It's it's in development. I have some plans for it. It's a lot of work. Um, You can find me on Twitter as well at @the_Haxor. That is also me. But yeah, best place probably is to catch me while I'm live streaming. We'll be ramping up, doing more of that, starting to do some more Warpless attempts, lower my time in that category. It's been a while since
Been a while.
had a yeah, it's been a while
Been a
since I
while.
had a Warpless PB. So and it's been, oh man, how many years now? It's been 3 years since I've had one with no hands, so I need a no hands PB. That's what I'm saying.
A no hands PB? What?
Correct. Yeah, so a PB where you don't play any of the hand stages. I
Oh, for some
for 3.
in my head, I'm thinking, are you playing with your mouth? Like, what are you
Oh
doing?
no.
Oh, come on,
Yeah,
no
yeah,
hands. No,
sorry,
no,
yeah,
that
the
makes
hand
no.
stages.
That
Yeah.
should have made sense to me because it's Mario 3. But for some
Yeah.
reason in my head, I'm thinking, are you playing like? Is this one of those strange categories where people play like Punch Out blindfolded, but you play Mario 3 with your face? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm Andrew G juggling while playing Mario 1 with my feet.
Yeah.
That's he's done that before. It's
I
funny, but
I
yeah.
believe if it was that specific of a reference, though, I do want to see like face rolling Mario 3 runs and see what would happen. Just
Oh
like
god. Oh.
bind a movement to every single key on the keyboard and just face roll and see how far you make it.
Not very far.
That'd be the dumbest thing in the world, and I want to see it.
Oh
But
man.
okay. Anything else though? Did I cut you off at all?
No, yeah. Working on that. Because it's been 3 years. It's a 1 and 8, but apparently it's 1 and greater than 3 years. So I mean, gotta get one finally.
Got to get back to it. But
Yeah.
all right. As for me, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. If you want to email me, you can email me stillloadingcontact@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, you can do that in a number of ways. You can give it a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcasting app you use, because that helps more people find the show. If you want to support it monetarily, you can go to patreon.com/stillloadingpod. For $1 a month, you'll get the episodes a few days early at a higher bit rate and access to a patron exclusive Discord. If you want to go to the $5 level, you'll get all of that plus extra bonus episodes, which I actually teased a little bit a couple times in this episode. But you'll get 2 bonus episodes a month. So yeah, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. But the most important shout out I have is the Bit by Bit Foundation. The Bit by Bit Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to put video games and video game consoles in the hands of kids receiving inpatient care at hospitals. So if you want to support them, go to bitbybitfoundation.org and consider donating. And that will do it for this episode of the Still Loading podcast. Haxor, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Really enjoyed this.
And I will see you all next time.